Part 12. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 112. The schedule was exactly the same as going to school. She didn't have to face that annoying family all the time, so Sira had no objections. There were not many ladies practicing here. She passed by several piano and dance classrooms, and all she saw were unfamiliar faces. It seems like anyone can come here as long as they have enough money. This is the restaurant, and this is where you learn dining etiquette. There are 2 rows of long tables that can accommodate 40 people facing each other, like a public canteen. This is the corporal punishment room. Usually girls who make big mistakes will be locked up here to think about their mistakes. A dark little room with no lights except for a black leather sofa. This is the teacher's office. If you need to take leave for something, you can come here to see me. Normally, you can take 1 day off at home 7 days a week. In an office area with bright windows on 3 sides, several women were standing around a man with a slender back. His silver hair that almost reached his tail was particularly eye-catching in the wood-colored interior. Sierra paused and looked at the familiar figure without blinking. Bernice also noticed the young man with his back to them. A hint of surprise and admiration rose in his eyes, and her stiff tone became a little softer. "I will take you in to recognize the teacher." She stood at the door and knocked on the wooden door with the back of her hand. "We have new classmates here." The gentle voice was completely different from the tone of voice that had just been spoken to about Sira. She couldn't help but turn her head and glance, and then looked away clearly. Yes, after all, no one can resist the charm of Logozide. The 5 people in the office, including the silver-haired young man, all looked at the girl in black skirt standing by the door. When he met Roxette again, he stood in front of him with his legs in khaki trousers, holding a box of cookies in his hand. The beige wool vest on his body was warmed by the sunlight, and the cold white shirt clung to his body. Touching his skin, the buttons were buttoned below the Adam's apple, and the neck was slender. "This is the new piano teacher," sighed Cyril. "This is the dance teacher." Bernice's voice gradually faded away, and Cyril looked at Logozide, who was only a few steps away from her, without saying a word. The people and objects around her gradually faded away, leaving only the pleasing sight of him. Logozide walked up to her holding the biscuit box. He lowered his head slightly and stretched out his clean hands to her, without any mermaid characteristics. "Hello, Miss Sarah." A beautiful voice like singing, so familiar. Sierra also stretched out her hand, and when the 2 hands were held together, she felt his fingers tightening. "You know my name?" she asked with a smile. Understood. Logozide quickly let go of his hand, with a certain degree of alienation, which was the opposite extreme from his previous state of being in estrus at every turn in the dream. Sierra became interested in his attitude of pretending not to know him, so she simply pretended to be a stranger, looked away from him, and walked up to the other teachers to say hello one by one. His polite attitude and ladylike behavior made it difficult for several teachers to find fault. "You look well educated." "Thanks." "Okay, Sira, come to the classroom with me now, and let's recognize your new classmates," Bernice called her at the door. While continuing to ignore Roxette and passing by him, Sira heard the whispers of the teachers inviting him to have dinner. As for whether he agreed or not, she didn't hear clearly. The gaze staring at her back was quite piercing, and she didn't disappear until she turned the corner and left. Before noon, language classes were being held in the classroom, and they were learning the Sunderland language. The class was interrupted by Sira's arrival. There were only 15 tables inside. She came to these strangers generously and introduced herself. A daughter from an earl's family came here to take classes. Many girls were surprised. Most of them were born into wealthy families and spent a lot of money to come here. They had not had much contact with titled nobles, let alone a girl from Leicestershire. "Miss." For a while, The atmosphere in the classroom was tense. Sierra found an empty desk at the back, walked over and sat down. As soon as her butt touched the chair, Bernice placed 2 sets of clothes she had just brought in on her desk. If you trouble Ms. Sarah, you will wear the same clothes as your classmates from now on in school. Sierra looked at the girls sitting in front of them and found that they were all wearing black skirts with large skirts, a row of black buttons on the chest that went directly to the neck, and a lace collar blooming around them. Why, she felt like this was more like going to jail. To prevent the emergence of comparison. It's really rigorous. Okay, today you should take a class here to get familiar with it. I believe you will be proficient in the Sunderland language class. Bernice settled her down, gave her another set of textbooks, and left. The Sunderland language is indeed very familiar in Sierra's memory. This is similar to the fact that she has muscle memory and can ride a horse. These are skills left to her by the previous Sarah. Not particularly proficient, but I can keep up. She honestly finished a class in the new environment, and when it was time to relax during the meal, a dozen girls found their playmates and left side by side, and no one said hello to Sierra. It was a little harder to learn than she thought. She stood up silently, was the last one to walk out of the classroom, and walked slowly towards the large dining hall. Passing by the piano room, the closed door suddenly opened, and Sierra swayed and was pulled in by the hand that stretched out from inside. Loosiet took her back, tightly stuffed her whole body into his arms, and then let out a charming sigh. It's me. Of course I knew it was him, who else could it be besides him? Sierra's face was buried in the woolen vest, and his heartbeat was trembling, rubbing against her face through the clothes again and again. These inhuman creatures really have no idea how terrifying their power is. The excited Roxad probably wanted to strangle her to death in his arms, then drag her back to the bottom of the sea to treasure her. Enduring the discomfort of having her ribs broken, Sierra pushed Roxade's waist with her left hand, raised her face and said, "Teacher Roxade, will you hug and hug your students like this on the first day you meet them? Who met you on the first day?" He rejected their unfamiliar relationship without a moment's hesitation, and the little distance she pushed away quickly closed back tightly. "Losside, please hug me gently." She twisted her body. When the hands on her back relaxed, Sierra hugged his waist and rested her chin on his chest to look at him. "Didn't you just accept cookies from other teachers and pretend to be unfamiliar with me?" Loosiet explained, "I read books on the ship for a few days to understand your world. The teachers here cannot have a close relationship with the students. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Shur." Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 113. That's why he chose to pretend to be unfamiliar to outsiders, then turned around and pulled her into an empty classroom for a hug. Sierra raised her eyebrows. "Isn't this even more exciting? Why did you come back by boat? Did you take a nearby merchant ship?" "No, I used a merchant ship that was stranded on the island." Loosiet picked her up and put her on the top of the piano to sit down. He squeezed one leg between her skirts and closed the distance again. "I miss you." The girl sitting on the piano was at just the right height for him to kiss her lips, but Loosiet didn't do it immediately. He gently pulled up her right wrist, which was fixed with a splint. "Is this the wound that kept you awake all night?" He manually began to remove the bandage wrapped on the wooden board. "What are you doing?" Sierra quickly took his hand to stop him from continuing to dismantle it. "Help you." He raised his head and opened his lips slightly. His pink lips and tongue were clearly visible, and his intention was obvious. Sierra suddenly remembered that his saliva could not only be taken internally, but could also be used externally to have this magical effect. She suddenly asked tremblingly, "Are you going to lick my hand?" Otherwise, his eyelashes flicked across his eyelids, revealing a look of confusion that was incompatible with his evil and beautiful face. After a few seconds, the confusion turned into cute confusion. "Of course not. It's so dirty." I absolutely don't want it. Sierra shook her head vigorously and took out her right hand and put it on her back. I refuse you to do this. Her strong resistance made Luosied frown. This will make you recover quickly, you know that, don't you? It's okay if the injury is in your mouth. You must not lick my fingers. Okay, he lowered his eyes, with a look of loneliness on his face after being rejected, and even his long, mercury-like hair looked strangely dull in Sierra's eyes. A strong feeling of guilt suddenly surged into my heart when I faced this face. It seemed that the person just wanted to lick his hand to heal his injury, and didn't have any other weird thoughts. Sierra touched his face with one hand and said softly, I don't mean to dislike you, but I think the wrists wrapped in gauze that haven't been washed for several days are very dirty. Can I clean them for you next time? He raised his drooping eyes, and his eyes became bright again. His pointed chin gently touched her warm little hand. I don't mind. But I don't mind. Sierra's hand moved to Luolevenda's lips, her eyes were soft and focused. I miss you, Luolevenda, very much. Compared with those false touches in the dream, you are really letting me know now. I'm excited. I just saw you in the office. I'm really happy. Her fingertips slid across his chin, touched his neck, then landed on the broad, thin shoulders, teasing his body and senses, and finally stopped in front of the pounding heart. You are so beautiful when you become a human. You are more beautiful than any man I have ever seen. The admiration radiating from the bottom of Sierra's eyes could not be deceived. Her emotional release and real touch completely infected Roxette. He stared at her light red lips with lipstick for a moment, then leaned forward and kissed her before being driven crazy by the girl. Sierra was pushed backwards, and his waist and head were quickly held back by him. The soft lips collided, and the two sides started a heated discussion. Without the worry that the fangs will bite the mouth, the entanglement in the mouth will become more and more difficult to separate. The body temperature became so high that she could hardly breathe. She pulled his woolen vest with her left hand and pulled out a lot of hair on it. I operate it normally, don't lock it. There is another chapter to get up and start hair. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 114. Sierra felt that it was almost done. If she continued to let things go like this, she would have to go to class in the afternoon with a swollen mouth. Okay, Luxide, please stop for a moment, I'm hungry. She barely squeezed out a soft word from the gap, her eyes were moist, and her pretty face was full of pity after being bullied. Luosied slowly left her and took a deep breath. The clarity in his eyes had long since disappeared, and his lake blue eyes were filled with a misty feeling of dissatisfaction. When are you going to continue? He nuzzled her neck and bit her earlobe, trying not to let her come down. Sierra shrank her neck itchingly. Besides, I'm going to the restaurant to eat. Miss Sarah. Where have you been? Bernice's stern cry appeared in the corridor outside the classroom. Luosied had no choice but to hug her down. I bought a house on the street. Sierra blinked. Where did you get the money to buy a house? He smiled solemnly and said, I caught it from the sea. Do you want gold coins? I also brought a lot of gold coins and jewelry. Sierra shook her head and straightened her wrinkled skirt. Let's talk about it later. I'll go eat first. Luosied thoughtfully helped her open the door, and the two walked out side by side, just in time to meet Bernice, who was approaching. I'm sorry, Ms. Bernice, I asked Mr. Lucid about a few piano questions. Sierra put on a decent smile, which made it difficult for anyone to tell the difference. Really? Bernice glanced at Rox twice, then unnaturally averted her eyes without making any objections. Okay, come with me to the restaurant. The students were already sitting upright in the large dining hall. Everyone saw the piano teacher coming in from the door. No one took their eyes away for a moment. He was so perfect. The way the creator created things is always carefully carved and perfunctory. The teachers were at a separate table, everyone was ready, and lunch began to be served one after another. It started with an appetizing sweet soup, and the restaurant teacher taught them how to drink the soup gracefully. As a countess, it was entirely up to Sira whether she wanted to follow the rules or not, as she was doing very well now. A teacher whispered from behind. I asked her to answer several questions in the language class just now. I think there is nothing to teach her in the textbook. She has learned many courses at home with tutors. Her restaurant etiquette is also good, better than any other child. Why did Grandpa Lizzie send her here to learn? She doesn't seem like a rebellious and uneducated child. I heard that he is getting married to Mrs. Josie next month. He probably wants to throw his ex-wife's daughter out to exercise. Who knows? Bernice tapped her plate with her spoon. Don't talk behind your back and eat. Luxide was sitting at the teacher's table, with his back to Sira. She could clearly see how he skillfully cut meat with a knife and fork, and she couldn't help but secretly marvel. A mermaid who can reproduce all human etiquette and lifestyles one-to-one just by absorbing knowledge from books has a terrifyingly strong learning ability. He was definitely not as easy to deceive as before, and his husky-colored eyes were full of intelligence when he turned to look at her. Sensing her gaze, Luosied raised his lips and smiled lightly, causing the hearts of the girls around Sira to beat like thunder. After being squeezed out in the morning, the situation will suddenly be reversed. The girl on Sierra's left side secretly touched her with her elbow. Countess, do you know the new piano teacher? Vote. Carrot, as expected, people disappeared as soon as it was put on the shelves. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 115. I don't know. It's our first time meeting you today. She lowered her head and took a sip of soup. Oh, then who is he smiling at? The girl was excited and her back straightened up a lot. Smile at me. Then you still say you don't know her? A basin of cold water was poured from her head. Maybe that's why he smiled at me, because I'm good looking. The girl who was sarcastically rolled her eyes. You nobles always look arrogant and aloof. Sierra responded expressionlessly, thank you. You are indeed as difficult to get along with as the rumors say. I hope you can spend your school life here safely. The girl snorted coldly, and the deep meaning in her words alerted Sierra. Usually when this happens, she will be subject to school violence. She was bullied when she was poor and was subsidized to go to school. She was called to the principal's office several times because of the beatings. That period of life is quite memorable. Sierra finished her meal slowly, and during the lunch break they could go to the dormitory to rest for 2 hours, or go for a walk in the backyard with the fountain pool. She took the key given by Bernice and opened the door to the dormitory, which was a small attic with a 4-person room. There was a skylight on the ceiling and a small bed covered with pure white bedding. The style was pretty good. The 3 people who were already resting inside paid no attention to her. It was as if they had agreed, and they had a tacit agreement to treat her with contempt from morning till now. Although Sierra didn't mind the situation, it was unusual to be treated like this on the first day. No rich person likes to be hostile to nobles for no reason. They are usually friendly and polite. Sierra walked to the only empty bed, and the 3 heads behind her turned around and stared at her without blinking. She immediately realized something was wrong under the quilt. Aren't you going to bed, Miss Sarah? Standing there like a log. What did you put under the quilt? She turned her head and crossed her arms with a scrutinizing look on her face. I don't care about anything, I just care about you, a girl said with a smile. On the first day of school, make a friend. Lena, the blonde girl on the other bed, called her timidly, but then shrank back with a glare. With confidence in her mind, Sierra turned around and lifted up the quilt. Before she could react, A series of laughter started from behind. A plump dead mouse lay on the white bedclothes, with dark red blood staining the bedclothes. The scene was disgusting. I originally thought that the pampered young lady in front of me would be frightened and run away. The laughter lasted for more than 10 seconds. After I found that Sierra stood there motionless, I gradually couldn't keep it up. The sharp tone suddenly turned down, and the atmosphere gradually changed. Got to be embarrassed. Are you done laughing? Sierra turned around expressionlessly. I'm done laughing, the girl named Lena replied blankly. So you're not afraid of mice? Are you afraid? Sierra asked. Of course I'm afraid. No one here is afraid of this thing. I know. Sierra nodded seriously, then walked over and slammed the door shut. The three girls saw her return to her bed again, bent down, and grabbed the dead mouse with her bare hands. Hiss, the three of them gasped in unison, and immediately felt that their throats were clogged and a little nauseated. Sierra turned around while holding the dead mouse, raised her lips and smiled, showing her white teeth. You scared me just now, so now it's my turn to scare you. Ah! As soon as Bernice stepped onto the attic to prepare for the ward round, a high-pitched scream penetrated the fragile door panel, seeming to make the entire White House tremble violently. She hurriedly ran to the door and tried to open the bedroom door, but it was already locked inside by Sierra, who was prepared. She was putting the dead mouse on the face of the girl named Lena. The timid blonde girl next to her was hiding under the quilt and screaming. The other one came up to help but was opened by Sierra. Of course, this also caused a sharp shock to her injured right hand. The moment the splint hit the face of the girl behind her, her face twisted in pain. Seeing that the door could not be opened, Bernice hurriedly shouted to the teachers running up from downstairs, "Go and get the spare key." Logos Yed, who heard the noise, shouldn't have appeared here, but under his influence, none of the female teachers felt that it was inappropriate for him to come to the girls' dormitory. Sierra didn't care about the chaos happening outside. She held the dead mouse in one hand and pressed it against Lena's face, threatening, "Who told you to do this? No one. Take it away, take it away. I don't know who put it up. You don't have to tell the truth, the price is that I stuff all the rats in your mouth." As Sierra said, the furry mouse was moved close to the other person's mouth. Lena, who was about to be frightened and vomited, cried and begged for mercy. "It was teacher Bernice who asked us to do this." Sierra knew in her heart that Josie had prepared her to go to school here. It was perfectly normal for this thoughtful lady to collude with teachers and students to punish her. Chiaoki wanted to completely turn herself into a hysterical villain. She was really good at planning it, but she underestimated how crazy she could be. Sierra climbed off Lena's body to temporarily spare her, and threw the mouse she was holding in her left hand toward the door. Bernice opened the door just in time to come in. The bloody rat was thrown onto the hem of her skirt and rolled down to the floor. Ah, Bernice was also startled, and her body fell towards rocks behind her. Unfortunately, she staggered back several steps, and even when her body hit the wall, she didn't hit the person she wanted to hit. Logos Yed walked sideways into the door, and stepped on the dead mouse on the floor inside the door with his brown lace-up leather shoes. The grey long-haired corpse exploded like jam under his feet. He glanced down and continued to calmly raise his legs towards Sierra, who was kneeling on the bed with blood on her hands. The rubber solace made a strange rustling sound in the quiet bedroom. A string of bloody footprints followed him all the way. On the bed, Lena's hair stood on end because he directly crushed a mouse. She stared blankly at the handsome young man walking over, feeling a sense of fear in her heart. Roxad's eyes moved slightly, scanning the other two girls who were at a loss. Then his eyes fell on Sierra. He naturally took her bloody hand and took out a grey handkerchief from his trouser pocket. "Wipe the blood on it little by little. Did that dead mouse scare you?" "Don't worry, I've trampled it to pieces," he said gently, without any warmth in his lake blue eyes. "Why would you step on someone who is already dead?" Sierra's heart was full of questions. She didn't feel comforted by such behavior. Instead, she felt that Roxt was like an abnormal crazy critic. It seems that he still hasn't learned human thinking very well. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 116. I'm just playing with my classmates. I have to wash my hands now because I won't be able to wipe them clean. After saying this with a smile, Sierra said. The man in front of her took away the handkerchief and put his hands under her armpits to lift her off the bed. Down. Sierra, dot. I'll go with you, Sierra-san. This awkward teacher-student relationship is like cosplay. After all, he dug the hole himself. Sierra stepped into the role and said, Okay, thank you, Mr. Lucid. Bernice watched Lucid lead the man over. At first sight, she didn't realize how wrong this behavior was. The mermaid's skills allowed her to selectively ignore some things. Luoxied said to her gently and politely, Please ask what happened just now. Why did they make such a big noise just to play with a mouse? I will investigate clearly, Bernice said dully, staring blankly at Luoxied's retreating back. Tens of seconds later, she suddenly came to her senses, as if her soul had rushed back into her body. She endured nausea and stepped over the rotten rat and walked in. Sierra was pulled to the fountain pool in the backyard by Lassie. He probably didn't understand the faucet yet, so he directly took her left hand and put it into the pool. He also scrubbed her skin with a handkerchief, and the skin turned red quickly. Lightly blooming in the pool. Does your right hand hurt? He sat on the white tiles next to him, and the water vapor mixed with the wind hit their faces. Sierra lowered her head and glanced at her slightly trembling right wrist. It's not bad. It's a little numb when I hit someone. Just take it easy and it'll be fine. Can't you let me lick it? He asked bluntly. Sierra looked embarrassed and couldn't help but remind him, Can you not be so direct? No human will directly ask someone if they can lick their wrist. They will only ask if they want to take you to the hospital. The hospital doesn't have any use for me, you know. Lucid wrung out the handkerchief and wiped her left hand clean. Sierra was even more embarrassed. As long as there was one more person present, this matter could be distorted. She changed the subject and said, Luoxied, if you wipe my hands in such an aboveboard way, wouldn't those teachers and students think too much? No, they will be in a trance during this period. He raised his head and said softly, Do you want to bully them back? I can let those 3 students eat rats directly. How many do you want them to eat? Sierra raised her eyebrows. Don't you think it's me bullying them again? That scene just now. Why do you think so? He frowned in confusion, and his next words gave her a critical blow to her little heart. How can you bully others? Whatever you do is right. Sierra clutched her chest, her mind filled with unexplainable screams. Seeing her pupils trembling and her eyes looking incredible, Luoxied smiled slightly and said, Are you surprised that I said that? She nodded, I'm quite surprised. I'm very happy that you trust me wholeheartedly. Are you going to my house tonight? Okay. Sierra, who almost bit her tongue, came to her senses and realized that she was trapped. She immediately objected, No, it can't be done. I have to go home for dinner tonight. Luoxied's smile faded a little. I promised you to become a teacher, but you still can't be with me. Of course not at night, but at other times, Sierra said righteously. In my world, how can an unmarried girl spend the night in another man's house? You haven't read anything about this in the library? Knowledge. She was afraid that she would risk losing her virginity if she went there at night, and he was not honest when he held her and kissed her. When can that happen? He frowned. During the holidays. How about we go home for lunch together? She hurriedly asked for a time, regardless of whether she was really free at that time. Okay. He reluctantly agreed to her. Sierra was relieved. After her fingers were dry and her right wrist no longer hurt, She walked back side by side with Roxt. The lunch break was almost over, and Bernice was uncharacteristically cruel to the three girls who bullied Syrah, and put them all in the meditation room. Lena covered her frightened chest and asked her with a puzzled look, "Isn't it your instruction?" "Shut up," Bernice said fiercely. The key clicked and she turned around to leave. In the afternoon, there were social classes and some necessary cultural classes. Sierra handled them all easily. At 5 o'clock in the evening, she finally dragged her tired body out. Passing by the activity hall downstairs, several teachers took the trouble to ask Rosside if they could have dinner or watch a musical, including Bernice. She glanced at him, mouthed "See you tomorrow," and walked out the door and down the steps. Loosied watched her get into the car through the window, his eyes never leaving for a moment. Sierra didn't go home immediately. She asked Joey to drive to the butcher shop. Eric was not there, leaving Gail alone in the shop. Gail put down the meat chopping knife and asked her, "Sella? I thought a fish had landed. What's the strange smell on you?" "It's a long story. I'm here to help you with a little favor today." Sierra was used to their dog's nose. "What's up?" "My laundry factory is about to start operations, and I need to get business now. How can I help you?" "Our tribe washes its own clothes." Gail was confused. "Last time you talked to a miner, didn't they think the laundromat's prices were too high? I accept batch laundry here, and the price is a quarter cheaper. The minimum price is 10 pieces. During the event, you can wash 2 more pieces for free." Seeing Gail's thoughtful expression, Sierra smiled and continued. "And wasn't there the railway track construction from Walton to Worley not long ago? I hope you can help me attract business, and I will give you a commission, just like when we open a butcher shop in partnership. The only difference is that you only need give the labor, don't give a penny." Gail stared at her blankly, and then patted her thin shoulder for a long time. "I heard Eric talk about you opening a factory before. Are you sure it's worth it because the labor cost is so high?" "I bought a group of black slaves, didn't Jem tell you?" Sierra said with a smile. "Compared to these laundresses in town, the price will definitely be cheaper. I've been busy at the butcher shop lately, so I really don't know." Gail thought for a moment and then agreed, "I know the address of your factory. If there is business, I will bring it to you as soon as this weekend." "Thank you, Gail." Sierra shook hands with him friendlily, and then set off to go home. When the car returned to the manor, it was just getting dark. The 3 people in the library were still talking happily about going to the aquarium together on the weekend. Syrah's arrival broke the peaceful atmosphere. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 117. Lizzie's expression instantly exuded rigid sternness. He stared at her without saying a word, as if waiting for her to bow her head and apologize to him. They have indeed been angry for a long time. Sierra walked to the empty green leather sofa next to her and sat down. She put her feet on the small soft leather stool in front of her, raised her bandaged hind legs, and sighed comfortably. "So, the aquarium is your family's exclusive space going on a trip, right?" "Sierra, you and we are a family." After Mrs. Josie finished speaking, she felt that she had said the wrong thing and immediately changed her words. "I mean we are a family soon, so of course you have to go with us." This aggrieved tone made Lizzie's defense deflect every minute. "Sella, don't get angry with Dad and us," Anna echoed. "You are my sister." Sierra's nerves were throbbing with pain, and she rubbed her temples. "The school I went to today was very good. Guess what interesting thing happened?" No one answered her, so she kept to herself and said, "I found a dead mouse on the bed where I rested at noon today." My dear classmate told me that it was Mrs. Jiao Qian who instructed the teacher and classmates to punish me. Of. Before Jiao 11 and Anna 11 changed their faces, Lizzie denied it without thinking, absolutely impossible, she is really planning for you. Sira, who had expected this outcome, didn't care. She stood up, walked to her father, bent down, and said in a soft voice, "Of course it's impossible. I just made a joke to liven up the atmosphere. Dad, all the decisions you make now are correct." She would not tell him anything about the Great Depression and workers' protests in the future. She would just let him be stalked to death by his mistress little by little. The sluggish nobles, accustomed to enjoying the life of big landowners, don't know that there will always be a price to pay for progress. Sierra straightened up slightly and said in a brisk voice, "Okay, my dearest family members, it's almost 7 o'clock. Can we have dinner together? I still have many interesting things in class that I want to tell you." Her face changes too quickly, and her sinister appearance always makes the whole family unhappy. "Actually, there is something I want to tell you." Anna 11 pretended to be a gossip to her at the dinner table. "Today, Dad received a call from the capital. The daughter of a marquis is coming soon." "Oh, what does it have to do with us? Do you welcome me as a landlord?" Sira used a spoon to scoop out the meat from the oysters. The simply steamed tender meat was poured with a layer of delicious soup. The delicious taste kept her coming. "I asked the servant for 4. After the 4th one was finished, she heard Anai's voice full of pity. "She is here for a few days at the request of the king, and we will receive her. It is said that His Majesty plans to marry her to Mr. Rosehill." Sira slipped a sip of champagne down her throat. Instead of the embarrassment Anaxi expected, her face was filled with joy, and she almost clapped her hands. She said happily, "To be honest, if the Marquis's daughter can successfully seduce him, I will be the first one to come and give him gifts." Anaxi's expression froze. "I thought your relationship with the Duke was inseparable from each other. If you don't think so, this kind of random speculation is really cheap." Sira smiled with a knife hidden in her face. "Which lady likes to talk about other people's private lives behind their backs? When that Marquis lady comes, you can't talk nonsense anymore. If something happens to your father, we just need to receive guests. Vote. There is one more chapter to get up and start writing. Today is the last day of PK, remember to book in full." After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 118. Anashi was speechless, and Lizzie also criticized her. It was Mrs. Josie who was more sophisticated and changed the topic to the wedding to be held next month. What Sierra didn't understand was why she didn't just arrange for the young lady to live in her own home in Rose Hill. Later, after the meal, she figured it out. The king also knew how terrible it was for the bloody Duke to go crazy. He was afraid that Rose Hill would need his financial resources. Since he couldn't give him a woman openly, he took a roundabout way. This is Mr. APU's intimidation that failed and turned into a honey trap. It was a good thing for herself. If that beauty could divert Rose Hill's attention away from her, her danger would be reduced by half. Although she felt that this possibility was not very high, the probability of Xiao Xiangyun had the upper hand. After dinner, she took a walk in her back garden. In spring, the low wall was covered with lavender roses, blooming among the tender green leaves. Anaxi was playing the piano again in the piano room upstairs. I don't know where her brain was because she had a seizure. She wanted to play Wanderer's Fantasia that night. The hoarse and unpleasant music almost ruined the beautiful view of the courtyard in front of her. Sierra sat on the bamboo swing surrounded by green vines in the yard, swaying slightly on her toes. The leaves on the rose wall behind her fluttered. She stopped on her toes and looked back. The silvery moon, which was not obscured by clouds and fog, was mostly covered by the young man's muscular figure. The shadow of the moonlight shrouded his front, and one could easily identify who it was by relying on its outline. Eric? How did you get here? You are indeed as fishy as Gale said. He jumped down from the wall lightly, and Syrah gave him a spot on the swing for him to sit on. That mermaid is back, right? He said angrily. You smell like him from head to toe. Sierra admitted simply, well, he's back. Can't you stay away from these inexplicable people? He said with a headache. Do you know that you may lose your life at any time? Lawson is not a mysterious person. You know he saved me. The way Syrah defended the mermaid made Eric's heart start to overflow with acid bubbles. What a good person. Do you think mermaids are like what is written in the book Mermaid and will become bubbles for love? Why did this matter involve the mermaid again? Sierra turned her head and looked at him. Won't he become a bubble for love? Of course not. I will tear you to pieces and eat you till you are real. Eric came closer to her, with a faint hint of intimidation on his boyish and determined face. Mermaids like to eat people the most. Every year, merchant ships that accidentally enter their territory. How many? No one lost in the ocean comes back safely. Sierra, who had been taught a lesson, suddenly understood, and she asked why Rawside came back on a merchant ship, and asked her if she wanted jewelry and money. When he returned home, he not only changed his legs, but also went to buy goods. Sierra? Did you listen to what I said? Eric looked helplessly at her lost look. That's not true. Why save me if he wants to eat me? Sierra continued to shake her head. Don't worry, Eric. Eric didn't reply to her words. He suddenly turned his head alertly, as if his eyes were going to pass through the rose wall. How can I rest assured that you go into the house and go to Syrah? The sound of the piano upstairs also stopped abruptly at this moment, and the sound in C major was as hoarse and ferocious as a saw pulling wood. Sierra was keenly aware that there must be someone outside the wall. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 119. Within a few seconds, the sound of the car's engine came from far away, and slowly stopped at the door. Sierra stood up. Who is coming? No one. You should go back to the house and sleep. Remember to lock the door and don't let anyone in. Eric stood in front of her, his thick black eyebrows furrowed, and a ferocious look almost spilled out of his eyes. Is it Rose Hill? Sierra could guess who the visitor was from his facial expression. You go back first, Eric. She patted him on the shoulder. That gentleman visiting late at night must have something important to do. What if he comes for you? Do you want to go out? Eric wanted to grab her right wrist, but when he saw that the splint was still fixed, his hand turned abruptly in the air and held her shoulder. Syrah thought for a while and nodded. I want to go out. If he calls me, I will definitely go out. What else can I say about this? Rose Hill was at home, and he could probably hear their conversation in the yard. If she said the wrong thing, she would be dead. There was a moment of disappointment in Eric's eyes. He lowered his hands and his head drooped. For you, he is the most suitable marriage partner, right? This way you don't have to worry about the dowry. Eric, do you think I'm a money worshipper? No, he denied flatly, his handsome face full of tangles and worries. I am just telling you as your friend that he is not a good match. Just like the mermaid, they are not good people. Sierra couldn't help but laugh. She patted away some of the fine ash that fell from his shoulders when he climbed up the wall. She put her white and tender palms against his neck to feel the special body temperature on it. You always say they are all bad people, aren't you a bad person? Eric. For a teenager, his concept of love is still immature, but this feeling that keeps her away from bad people has always been pure. I'm not. He lowered his head, his brown eyes clear and transparent. I will protect you. The professional speaking skills of the male protagonist of B Game are here again. Whether it is Roxid's preference or Eric's protection, these originally belonged to the little white flower with the core of the piranha upstairs. They have nothing to do with her in real life. Relation. Sierra suppressed her heartbeat. She could fall in love with another person immediately every few hours this day. It was obvious that she was a scumbag. Are you a knight? Sierra stepped forward and rubbed his short, hedgehog-like black hair. You still want to protect me, a fake princess? Yeah, he lowered his head slightly, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. You say yes. Miss Sarah. Where have you been? The servant's cry came from the house, and she was walking towards the door of the back garden. Sierra took back her hand. Okay, go back, I'm going in. Must go. Do I have a reason to refuse? Sierra asked him with a smile, turned around, opened the wooden door of the department, and walked into the castle. The smile on Eric's lips faded, and his heart throbbed. He looked down at his palms, which were rough from long-term work. In terms of financial resources, he really does not have the power to give Sierra the power to say no to that disgusting vampire. His tribe only wanders on the fringes of society. Even if he wants to change the clan system that has been followed for hundreds of years, he must take into account the thoughts of his family. And their natural misanthropy makes it almost impossible for them to be willing to come down and integrate into town life. Sierra followed the servant to the living room, and Lizzie said to her quite gently, Mr. Rosehill invited you to watch a midnight movie. I thought it was already very late. What do you think, Sierra? Movie? What movie? She had never been to a movie theater here. Nosferatu Anasi said to her, the new cinema in town has just released it. It is said to be a horror movie. Sierra looked at the pale vampire standing by the door and didn't know what to say. The author who wrote this novel is really not a human being. Why did he incorporate this movie into it? The key is, why did he choose this time to invite her? Very suspicious. Sierra is actually quite afraid of watching horror movies, Mr. Rosehill Mrs. Josie said with a smile. She is much less timid than her sister. Rosehill is no longer in the same black suit. He is wearing a light gray woolen coat, a handmade red scarf tied around his neck, and a string of silver cross necklaces hanging below. He took his finger out of his pocket and stretched it towards Sela, and took off the rings on his knuckles cleanly. Under the gazes of Mrs. Josie and Lizzie, he grabbed Sierra's left hand without any courtesy, and his cold voice condensed into ice. I took him away and will bring him back later. The tone was more like a notice, without giving the family any chance to save him. Mrs. Josie was afraid of his authority, but she also didn't like his impoliteness. She asked aloud, what do you mean to our Sierra now? Are you taking her out in the middle of the night to cultivate her into a lover? We the family cannot afford to lose this person. Even if she is willing to be your lover, I will not agree. Although the lady's own mistress was in charge, what she said was quite right. Sierra nodded in agreement. She really wanted to know what Rosehill would say, but his response in the next second shocked her. Are you willing to agree? Rosehill was like a king who had been suggested a great solution. His stern face was half lowered, and he restrained his excitement and asked her condescendingly. Even he himself probably didn't notice how obvious the concern in his tone was. Sierra said without a smile, if I weren't afraid that my left hand would be broken, I would have left a fingerprint on your face. He was definitely out of his mind. He asked her to work for him some time ago, but now that Mrs. Josie mentioned it, he actually wanted her to be his mistress. She didn't even bother to pretend, and her words were so shocking that she scared several family members present. Lizzie's crutch slammed on the soft carpet on the ground. Sierra. What are you talking about? He wants me to be his lover. Why can't I be angry anymore? Sierra turned her head angrily. Anna 11, who didn't mind the trouble, tried to make up for it. There are not many nobles who don't support their lovers. In fact, this is not bad. Sierra was too lazy to pay attention to her and wanted to take her hand out of the cold big hand. I won't watch a movie with you, let go. I didn't say I wanted you to be my lover. Hearing her angry and rude words, Rose Hill's expression twisted. Keep your moral integrity and talk to me properly. Sierra snorted heavily. It's you who won't talk to me properly. If you really dare to ask me to be your lover, I will definitely hate you. I will do what I say. Rose Hill's fleeting unnatural emotion was crushed by indifference, her sexy lips pursed tightly, and she held her hand tightly and took her out without saying a word. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 120. The attitude between the two of them was more like a quarrel between lovers. Mrs. Josie still wanted to stop Sierra from being taken away. After all, Rose Hill was the golden son-in-law she wanted to find for her daughter, and she didn't want to be just like this bitch. Take it for free. But before she could speak, Lizzie beside her said first, let them go. Master, Qiao Qian's tone was high, but she softened quickly after meeting his eyes. But is this really okay? How unsafe? There is nothing unsafe. If Mr. Rosehill really likes Sierra and wants to marry her, we can't stop her, Lizzie said solemnly. Recently, the tenants in the fields are asking for a lower rent. Someone is renting it cheaper. Our household income is decreasing. He knew very well that he urgently needed a marriage with a rich man to solve the economic crisis that was slowly starting to appear in his family. As soon as Sierra got up after being pushed into the car, a dark figure squeezed in next to her. He was about to force her into a corner, and his momentum was indescribably terrifying. Hate me? Take back what you just said, he said sinisterly. All the cold air from his mouth fell on her neck, and his hands restrained her in her seat. Sierra felt that he was a little unusual today, and did not dare to anger him too much. Why did you come to watch a movie with me in the middle of the night today? There's something coming up from the sea, do you know? He bared his teeth uncharacteristically and lightly rubbed the delicate skin on her neck. This act of biting or kissing would really cost her her life. I don't know, what do you want to say in the middle of the night for no reason? Sierra didn't want to struggle anymore and lay on the leather mattress with a look of ruin. How many other men have you seduced? He bit her on the side of her neck gently, not too seriously. How dare you let anything get close to you? Sierra's heart pounded hard because of these words, and her mind went blank for a moment. The little vest she had just put on at Luoxid's place was quickly torn to pieces by Rose Hill. The centuries-old antique is indeed not in vain, his insight is simply frightening. Stop talking, he raised his face, his dark eyes rolling deep. She put her hand on his shoulder and pretended to be calm. Besides seducing you, who else have I seduced? He continued, like that smelly dog, like that mermaid. Sierra frowned and said speechlessly, Mr. Rosehill, does the smelly dog mean Eric? You know that I only like money and you. My dream is to marry you and be rich for the rest of my life. Why am I dating Eric, in love? He is just my good friend. As for the mermaid. She paused and said in a surprised tone, we are not the same species. What you think of me is too exaggerated. The twitching of her facial muscles, the disbelief in her eyes, and the slightly opened mouth were all perfect acting skills. Even the vampire pressing her couldn't tell whether it was the truth or a lie. Why don't you want to work for me? Don't use the same bad excuses from before. He brought the topic to this point again. You all have secrets, don't you? Sierra simply showed off with him. The last murder on the road, the secret I can't tell will bring trouble to me. Do you want to tell me the truth and then kill me? Kill you? Rosehill raised his face and stared at her, with a strange look on his face. You actually think I want to kill you? Sierra resisted the urge to roll her eyes. When did you do something that didn't scare me? You are too sensitive, Rosehill denied coldly, and he was quite good at making excuses. Aldine, who was driving ahead, silently parked his brand new classic car at the entrance of the cinema. The cinema has arrived. The door behind Sierra opened, and she was taken out again with her wrists firmly locked. The cinema had just opened for the midnight show, and the theater she was dragged into by Rose Hill was empty. "Have you booked the venue?" Sierra asked doubtfully. "Do you think I will watch a movie with others?" He glanced at her with a strong sense of ridicule, and then said proudly, "I bought this cinema." Okay, I know you are a super rich man, a diamond king." Rose Hill, who had captured her heart again, gladly accepted these glittering titles. She sat in the front row of the theater. The dark auditorium blended well with Rose Hill's terrifying aura. "What on earth is this? A midnight tryst or a confessional?" she asked. "Confession Bureau," Rose Hill frowned. "I don't need to confess anything to you, you already know the truth." "No, I don't really know yet." The old cameras started working, and as soon as the gothic-flavored orchestral soundtrack appeared, Sierra got goosebumps through the several large speakers on all sides. Of course she knew that this movie was about the vampire Dracula, and when Rose Hill brought her to see it, she had already kicked the tryst aside in her mind and put the confession game in front of her. After the screen played a paragraph of empty and scary words, a retro yellow picture unique to this era began to appear. Rose Hill beside her was not making any revolt. Apart from sitting on her left-hand side and holding her wrist tightly, his eyes were glued to the screen, and he was even more involved in the plot of the movie than she was. Sierra is not afraid of watching horror movies, but she is afraid of watching a horror movie about vampires with a vampire. The dark and deep soundtrack echoed in the theater without a single monologue. The mime style of the entire film made it difficult for Sierra, a modern soul, to watch it. She had limited artistic skills in understanding the plot, so she had to pretend. "God is often absent when we need him." She remembered this was the protagonist's line in the remake, and it seemed quite empathetic to use it in this scene. A low sigh followed and turned into a sneer. "This is a gift from God." Sierra turned her head. "A gift? From what angle in this movie do you think this is a gift? This is obviously a tragedy." A vampire's point of view. He turned his head, looked at her clearly in the darkness, and said word by word, "I am by no means a kind person," the lines he would say. How did he think from a mime that the bald and staring vampire could talk? Sierra wanted to be silent, but she couldn't stare at him through the dim light of the screen. "He released a plague, killed people in the town, and finally fell into the hands of a woman. How can you tell that it was a gift? Stagnation of time is a gift. Ability beyond ordinary people is a gift. The immortal body can only be exchanged for sucking blood. It's fair." Rose Hill showed a ferocious smile. "The PK is over and I'm currently at 4. If nothing else happens, I won't be able to advance. Damn, if I don't get into the second round, I'll stay at 4. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure." Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 121. He is really nothing like those self-pitying poet-type vampires in love literature who compare themselves to monsters. He compared blood-sucking to the price that must be paid after acquiring abilities. Sierra huddled in the chair and didn't know how to answer for a moment. She shrank her fingers and tried to slip out of his palm, but this strength would only make Rose Hill strengthen her shackles, so she had to give up and be obedient. Let him hold it? The price of eternal life is only a small price. He didn't know when he turned sideways and pressed the armrests on both sides of her. The pale outline in the darkness was getting closer and closer. His voice was low and seductive. "A very good deal, isn't it, Sierra?" Sierra's back was pressed against the soft chair. If possible, she wanted to hide her neck. The fact was that when she had this idea, she used her injured right wrist to pull off the red scarf around Rose Hill's neck. Trying hard to wrap one hand around his neck. "It's a bit cold, I want your scarf." Her voice was a little shaky. When she completed this action with poor vision, she got the necklace around his neck stuck in the gap of the medical splint on her right hand. Do you think vampires are afraid of crosses? Sira held the scarf and tried to wave the necklace away, her face gradually becoming anxious. They are not afraid of the sun, the screams of roosters, or any silver products, Rosehill said with a smile and contentment in the darkness. They are only afraid of having their heads twisted from their necks and their bodies being burned into a pile of ashes. Sira thought she didn't have the ability to pull out his head, let alone burn him. She bit her lip. The vampire who chased me last time was killed by Aldine and you. Can you, if you kill him easily, then who are you? He was about to touch her face, don't you know? An extremely white face, ice-cold body temperature, a body comparable to diamond, and superhuman speed and strength. Sira listed the things that she had noticed in her mind one by one, and Rosehill in front of her became even more happy. Vampire, she replied dryly, but you look different from the vampire in the movie. You are a handsome man. Will you still turn into a bat? The bald man with sharp eyes and pointed ears in the movie looks like a humanoid bat, which is very unsightly. No, I just saw our artist survive by chance. Lance visited him when this movie was released. Rosehill sneered and said, the twisted view of love in it is something that guy must change. His horror romance is so ugly. Is it really? The real-life director of Nosferatu knew he would definitely crawl out of his grave, but later generations actually integrated his great masterpiece into an otome game. Sierra tried her best to keep her mind empty and not think about those weird complaints. You told me the truth without intending to kill me or let me become your wife. Why, Rosehill? She stared straight at him, and the cross necklace broke off and fell to her knees. She finally got her wish and put the scarf around her neck, and the two of them just looked at each other wearing the same red scarf. I don't accept that I have weaknesses. He raised his chin arrogantly and narrated another tragic fact for him in a cold voice. A vampire has only one partner in his life. Once his partner dies in the endless abyss of time, it can completely destroy the living party, destroy his emotions, destroy his power, and destroy everything. He bared his white teeth and his delicate face looked a little more ferocious, and I will never allow this to happen to me. He must have seen too many vampires whose lives were destroyed by their partners, and he may have even broken them up with his own hands. Sierra buried her chin in the red scarf and whispered, so you only accept to play with me and don't admit your relationship with me. Is that what you mean? Before she could deny it, the girl in front of her said with bright eyes, it's not impossible. You can't marry me, but you can become my lover. Sira, who was angry a moment ago and wanted her to be her lover, hooked her right hand on the expressionless vampire at this second, and smiled charmingly, I will get married sooner or later. Since you don't have this plan, you can crawl into me in the middle of the night. My future husband's bedroom took me away and put me back one morning. As soon as she finished speaking, the hand that restrained her suddenly let go. Sierra was hugged by the cold hands that came in from the lower back of the seat. She exclaimed and stood up from the chair. She staggered forward and fell into Rosehill's body, who had opened his coat at some point. The hard body hit her chest and bones, causing pain. What are you doing? She frowned in pain. Want me to be your lover? His deep eyes forced her towards her with a very oppressive look. I have talked to you so much and you only got this stupid answer. Sierra was confused. What else? Isn't that what you meant? What else do you mean? I have only one job for you, Rosehill whispered, be my companion and follow me forever. Companions and partners are really two extremes. Sierra hooked his neck and narrowed her eyes. Mr. Rosehill, have you ever been in love? After doing so many things, you still compare me with Aldine, companion. She laughed, and all the kisses she did were in vain. The sudden topic made Rosehill confused for a moment, but then he started to show his pride again. Love. Women whose minds are full of lust and money are not worthy of my love. His self-confidence must have been with him since he was born. Sierra wanted to laugh, but the corners of her mouth tightened. Oh, Yes, you have said this more than once. Now I seriously suspect that you have misogyny. I don't hate you. Rosehill frowned, not realizing the conflict or double standards between his words. Sierra snorted softly, and the lights in the screening room turned on after the show. The remaining fear in her heart disappeared without a trace after she saw the blond man in front of her. Sir, how can there be such a good thing in the world? You want me to stay with you, but at the same time you are unwilling to give me any reasonable status. Followers and companions are not good names. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. I don't dare to be interested. Even if you reveal your nature as a vampire and dig your teeth into my neck, I will not follow you. Rosehill's face darkened visibly. You don't consider my proposal, and I don't consider yours either. She pulled off the scarf around her neck and threw it on his shoulders. We don't want to be each other's lovers, nor are we willing to be each other's followers. We can just be friends without any close relationship.